What's up, YouTube? I am the Vanilla Nerd, and today I get to make a video I've been wanting to make for a long time, which is comparing the Marvels and the Thunderbolts. Now, at first glance, these two movies are very different. The Marvels is a wacky space adventure with a lot of sci-fi action, lasers being shot out, translucent hands, and stuff like that. Whereas the Thunderbolts is a more grounded, grittier action adventure movie, and they use, they punchy a lot more than, any sci-fi laser action kind of thing. They're both technically sci-fi movies from a perspective. But regardless, the point is they're very different movies. However, as the title implies, they both show a team-up of characters. And this is something that I've been begging Marvel to do for so long. So the question I'm trying to answer is, why do I love the Thunderbolts because of its team-up, but really don't care for the Marvels despite having a team-up? We're going to get into that. However, first I do want to give a spoiler warning. I will be spoiling both of these movies extensively from start to finish, so if you haven't seen them, well, definitely go watch the Thunderbolts, but if you haven't seen the Marvels, that's okay. I'm going to give a lot of context for the Marvels because I recognize that's a movie that not a whole lot of people have seen, and this video might, make you feel justified of not having seen it. I don't really know. I don't really care. I did enjoy the Marvels when I watched it, but I recognize it's not a great movie. Regardless, spoiler for those two movies, but also up on screen, I'm going to put a spoiler warning for a bunch of minor spoilers for movies that feed into these films. There's a good chance I'll be talking about those movies and TV shows as they relate to these characters' growth and development and character continuity and all that stuff. So, minor spoilers for all of these things and major spoilers for the Marvels and the Thunderbolts. K. Alright, so when I first watched Thunderbolts, I was so happy. I was so glad. I felt like Marvel finally got it right. They finally went back to their roots and did what they needed to do all along, which was have a proper team-up movie of superheroes. It baffles me that it took them this long since Endgame to have a proper team-up movie. There have been a few other movies that have attempted this, and we'll get to those here in a second. But the point is that this is what made Marvel their money. Like, if we look back at Phase 1, right? I have no doubt that Iron Man 1 would have been a huge success no matter what else happened. But Iron Man 2 wasn't that great. I love the first Avenger. I love Thor. But again, they're kind of okay movies. They aren't great films. And same thing with Incredible Hulk. If it's not for the Avengers, Phase 1 fails, in my opinion. Phase 1, there's no reason to go back and rewatch those movies because those characters just don't come up again and those stories just aren't as interesting. Again, I love Phase 1. I love Iron Man 2. I love the first Avenger. I love Thor 1. I enjoy all of those movies and I rewatch them quite often. However, I recognize that they are extremely flawed. And without the Avengers to kind of tie it all together to validate you watching those, it just falls apart. And that's the problem I feel like with the last couple of phases, is that they haven't had a team-up movie to validate me watching their weirder, wackier shows. So here we are. And I was so glad that the Thunderbolts finally did that. Except I realized that the Marvels technically did it first, at least by the criteria I define. We'll get to that here in a second. Because first I want to go through the other three movies that are the closest thing that Phase 4 and 5 had to making a proper team-up before the Thunderbolts came out. Let's go through those real quick. You got Doctor Strange 2 in the Multiverse of Madness, you got Spider-Man No Way Home, and you got Deadpool and Wolverine. So, starting with Doctor Strange 2, Multiverse of Madness, technically the Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange share the same movie together, but they do not actually team up together. The entire time in that movie, the Scarlet Witch is used as a villain. Why they chose to go with this route, I'll never know. It's one of my biggest complaints with that movie because she is just pure evil and it's a problem. I really don't like it, but that's beside the point. The point is that they don't really team up, and it's not like they team up at the end and they're going to continue to be a magic team going forward because ultimately Wanda dies at the end of that movie. Most likely. We'll see if they keep her dead. Regardless, the point is that Doctor Strange isn't really a proper team up, and they don't set out to make a team going forward, so I really don't count that as a team up movie. Yes, technically the Illuminati is also in that movie, but again, Doctor Strange never works with the Illuminati. He just meets them and then they all die, which is fine. It worked for that film, but it's just anyway, point is, I don't really consider that a full-on team up movie. It was an attempt at a team up movie and it really just kind of fell flat. Next, we have Spider-Man No Way Home, which this is a proper team-up. You got Doctor Strange, you got Spider-Man. They work together. They also fight. We'll get to that later. And then Peter Parker also teams up with the other two Spider-Men from the other Sony movies, which is great. I love No Way Home. I think it's a great movie. However, I don't think it's a great team-up movie because the team doesn't exactly stay together. You know, they don't have longevity. It's not like they're going to bring back the other Spider-Man for future Marvel movies. At least I don't think so. I'll never say never, but I don't think it's going to happen. And then the only other friendship, Peter Parker and Doctor Strange, is broken now because a spell magically makes Doctor Strange forget Peter's memory. So, yeah. The team-up is very much failed. But the other problem I have with this movie in terms of being a team-up film is that it encourages you to watch previous Sony films, not previous MCU movies. We'll talk about that more in a second. And finally, we have Deadpool and Wolverine. And full disclosure, I have not seen this movie. It's a little too violent and a little too swear-heavy for my taste, but that's beside the point. I have read the plot summary, and I know a little bit about how it affects the wider MCU, which is to say that this movie, while a lot of people liked it, is a lot like Spider-Man No Way Home, where the team-up that they formed in that movie is not really going to last or continue, and it encourages you to watch other non-MCU movies, in this case, Fox movies. And so I think it's problematic in that way. It doesn't work as a good team-up film in that way, in my opinion. Because the criteria I have for a good team-up movie in the MCU is that A, as I've hinted at a bunch, the team continues on in the MCU. The fact that these people bond and become friends is important and carries over into future installments and future movies. That's very important. And B is the fact that the movie, by being a very fun get-together, encourages you to rewatch the old movies where these characters were introduced, regardless of the quality of those previous movies that introduced these characters in the first place, right? Right. So that's why, in my opinion, the Marvels and the Thunderbolts are actually rather comparable, because the team of the Marvels actually looks like they're going to stay together. Kamala Khan and Carol Danvers are going to be friends and continue. Yes, Monica technically goes into another universe at the end. That's beside the point. And in the Thunderbolts, are the new Avengers. They're gonna stay together at the end of their film. And both of these movies are connected to previous MCU projects. They're connected to a lot of characters that were introduced in phases 4 and 5, not characters from other franchises outside of the MCU. Thereby, it justifies and validates all the movies that they created for phases 4 and 5 and makes me want to rewatch the previous project that these characters appeared in, because I want to get the context. I want to remember these characters. That's what makes a good team-up movie. Regardless of the quality of these movies specifically, they both do those two big things. Their teams are going to be important moving forward, and the characters come from important things from the past. That's what I like, and that's the criteria I have behind a good team-up film. Next, I want to dive a little bit deeper into where these stories pull characters from. Starting with the Marvels draws characters from 3 big sources. First and foremost is Captain Marvel. It's obvious this is a sequel to that movie, more or less, and it introduces Captain Marvel. It also pulls from WandaVision, which introduced Monica Rambeau's Photon, and it also pulls from Miss Marvel, which of course has Kamala Khan's Miss Marvel, who's one of the Marvels in this movie. So yay. On top of that, Captain Marvel did appear in Endgame and the after credit scene of Shang-Chi. I bet you guys forgot about that. But those two didn't really have a whole impact on her character, so really her last major character development was in her debut movie. So there's that. And also Nick Fury is a big character in this movie, and his last project was Secret Invasion, but that TV show had literally no effect on the plot of the Marvels, so yeah, it really doesn't matter. And on top of all of that, there are 2 cameo appearances, one from Valkyrie, who was last seen in Thor Love and Thunder, and one from Kate Bishop, who was last seen in Hawkeye. So go watch those if you really want. But again, they're both cameo appearances, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah. But moving on to the Thunderbolts, like the Marvels, the Thunderbolts pulls characters from 3 main sources. You got the Falcon and Winter Soldier, which introduced John Walker's U.S. agent. You got Bucky in there as well. That was where he was last seen in his major character development. Technically, he was truly last seen in Captain America 4, The Brave New World, where he made a small cameo. But again, not a big impact on his character development, so doesn't really matter. Next, you got Black Widow, which introduced 3 characters that appear in this movie. Yelena's White Widow, Alexei's Red Guardian, and Taskmaster, although I'm not even going to bother looking up her fictional alter ego because it's not the same one from the comics, and she dies at the beginning of Thunderbolts, so it really doesn't matter. And lastly, you've got Ant-Man and the Wasp, which introduced Ghost, and she has not appeared in anything between that movie and Thunderbolts. So there's that. Technically, Yelena also showed up in Hawkeye, and there was some good character development for her. We learned that she was blipped during the Thanos snap and everything. We learned that she overcame and made peace with the death of her sister. So, yay, there's that. But again, not much. Definitely Black Widow is a lot more important to introducing her character than Hawkeye. But hey, watch Hawkeye if you want. It's a good show. I enjoyed it. And then also Valentina makes a big appearance in this movie. She functions as the main antagonist. And the last place we saw her was in Black Panther Wakanda Forever. But again, not a whole lot of that cameo made an effect on this movie. In that movie, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, she hinted at wanting vibranium for the U.S. government, which was kind of a cool plot line, like the Thunderbolts going in and stealing vibranium. But ultimately, it was not followed up for this movie. I don't really care. Marvel has lots of little plot lines that they don't follow up on. But, you know, all I'm trying to say is that her contributions to Black Panther Wakanda Forever are not large enough to warrant you rewatching that in order to understand the Thunderbolts, if that makes any sense. If anything, it's more important to watch The Falcon and Winter Soldier and Black Widow to show that John Walker and Yelena are both working for Val at the start of that movie, which makes sense. But I go through this exercise to show you that these 2 movies are really starting on equal footing. It's not like one movie is pulling from more MCU projects than another. And as I talked about with the big criteria, both of these teams seem to be sticking around. And, you know, the Marvels might not be sticking around the longest, but it has an after credit scene that shows that, like, this movie is going to affect the wider MCU, at least on a small degree. It's a really fun after credit scene. It just comes at the end of a really bland movie. But if you really want to hear my thoughts on the blandness of the movie, watch my review of it up there. And look, I recognize that the team up at the end of the Marvels isn't exactly going to have the most longevity. I mean, the team is broken up at the end, right? Monica's in a different dimension. And on top of that, Kamala Khan, while she seems to be staying friends with Carol Danvers, she is actively working with Kate Bishop to try and form the Young Avengers, which is cool. I'm excited for the Young Avengers, but yeah, this team up maybe might not last as long, which is kind of one of the criteria I talked about. But I do think that the friendship between Kamala and Carol Danvers is important, that was built in this movie and will continue in other movies that they will reference, and is something that, like, Captain Marvel will trust Kamala over a lot of other people because she's actually worked with Kamala Khan a number of times. Regardless, these are the 2 movies I'm comparing, and I don't really care to change my comparison at this point in time. Maybe I will expand the comparison out to other team-up movies later in a separate video, but not right now. Okay, so that was a lot of build-up to explain why I am comparing these 2 movies, but I felt it important to explain why I am comparing these 2 movies. I wanted to give you guys the full rundown of what kind of goes on in my brain as to why I care about these 2 films. So, you know, that's what I did. Whatevs. But talking about the actual comparison, why do I like the Thunderbolts more than the Marvels? Quite simply, the character work in the Thunderbolts is so much better than the character work in the Marvels. At the end of the day, the Thunderbolts has compelling characters, and that makes all the difference. It makes me like those characters, it makes me root for those characters, and the Marvels didn't do that once. And it's really surprising because while they both have about the same number of characters, the Thunderbolts gave satisfying character development to pretty much all of their characters. Yes, you could argue that Ghost didn't have a whole lot of development, but there were 2 notable actions that she made, which was twice she went back for her team. Twice, she could have just left them, but she went and opened the door for them in the furnace room, and she went back to find a truck to get them out of the desert fortress place, you know? So, yeah. I think that's more character development than even Captain Marvel got in The Marvels. And she was the most developed character in that movie. Like, that's what's really sad, is Captain Marvel was the most developed character, and it can be summed up in 3 bullet points. She killed the Kree Supreme Intelligence AI thing, which doomed their race. She feels bad about it, and she decides to make amends. That's it. That's her development. Technically, Monica got a little bit of development because she explains why she is really frustrated with Captain Marvel and has been angry at her for many, many years. But then she forgives her like 2 scenes later. So, yay. But it's just, yeah, there's next to no character development in the Marvels. And look, something I didn't talk about in my review with the Marvels was I recognized that that was a movie made under the old regime. There were lots of reshoots for that movie. There was a lot of micromanagement that happened in that film. So I get that, it's not all the director's fault or the actor's fault or anything. But I'm not trying to put fault here. I'm just trying to critique the MCU as a whole. And at the end of the day, the Marvels is a bland, boring movie with really bad characters. And the Thunderbolts isn't. And I hear some of you, right? You're saying, well, the Thunderbolts did have a guy with a superpower to show people their tragic backstories. And that's fair. However, the Marvels also had a plot device like this. They had a little scroll memory device thingy that showed you your memories. And they use it in the film to do one of the aforementioned character development points. It shows off Carol being distraught over the fact that she killed the Kree Empire, essentially. And so both movies had a plot device to show people their tragic backstories. It's just that the Thunderbolts happened to use it not only to show off backstories, but also to build relationships between the characters, because in a move of genius, they had Bob be able to view other characters' shame rooms, as well as other people to break through the shame rooms and meet up together. So that allowed them to all bond together and created a very fun and thrilling third act finale, which all added to the Thunderbolts being a better movie because their plot device wasn't just used once and thrown away later like the scroll memory device was used in the Marvel. But I want to go a little bit deeper into good characters because I want to talk about specifically the good team-up and the fact that the Thunderbolts took advantage of the fact that they had a team-up of characters, whereas the Marvels did not. Why and how that happened interests me, and that's what we're going to dive into. So the first thing that I think the Thunderbolts does right is the importance of comparison, which is, it's super basic, but show off the differences and similarities between your characters. Like, that's all you need to do. In the Thunderbolts, for instance, the characters are confronted with an unknown variable of Bob. Bob shows up in the furnace room, and everyone has a different reaction to him. Notably, John Walker's like, we should kill him, and Yelena's like, he's an innocent. I feel bad for the guy. Let's help him get out of here, just like we should all work together to get out of here. And this instantly endears us to Yelena. It makes us think that John Walker is still a jerk. Okay, yay. And we move on. But it develops those characters. And they keep doing this over and over again. The characters all have different and diverse reactions to different scenarios and situations. And showing those differences and the similarities, because sometimes they think very similarly, it makes us realize that they're bonding. It makes us realize that they're an actual team. And it puts them together. And honestly, this whole principle of comparison is something that all movies should do with their characters. It seems obvious, but the Marvels didn't do that. In the Marvels, you had nothing. Like, they go to a planet with singing people, and all the characters basically react the same. Like, I'm surprised they didn't have, like, Kamala dancing and singing and totally down to just go with it, and Monica being over there, like, questioning the sensicalness of it, being like, wait, how does this work? Like, if they're singing words, shouldn't they be able to understand just, like, regular words? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And, like, being confused and being like, I'm not going to sing. I'm not going to do that. That would be an easy way to differentiate these characters and to show them bonding and working together. And it'd be funny and interesting and and it didn't happen. And I'm just surprised that there were no scenes like that in the Marvels, like, period. Whereas in the Thunderbolts, they actually had scenes like that. The next one is a sneaky one, and that is that the importance of having the superheroes fight each other, which may not seem that important, but it actually happens in more team-up movies than it doesn't happen. The notable exceptions being Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which technically doesn't count as a team-up movie, but I digress. We already talked about that. And Captain America the Winter Soldier, which of course was a team-up between Captain America and Black Widow, and they never fought each other. Although, not for nothing, but she did fight the Winter Soldier, who basically has the same power set as Captain America, so kind of fulfills that, but not really. Anywho, regardless, these kind of fights happen all over the MCU, and they even happen in non-team-up movies. For example, in Ant-Man, where Ant-Man fights the Falcon. They don't really team up or work together, but he does fight the Falcon, which is kind of fun and exciting. And these fights are very important for a couple of reasons. First and foremost is fan service. I mean, since the very first Comic-Con, and even before that, I'm sure, nerds like myself were talking about, could my favorite superhero beat up your favorite superhero? That's what we all wanted to know. Those are the questions on all our lips. And seeing it brought to the big screen in a fun, satisfying way is really, really cool and really, really fun. And look, you should never make a scene just for the sake of fan service, but if you completely ignore the fans, that's also a big problem. I mean, you're trying to bring fans to these movies in the first place, right? Right. Another fun thing that these fights between superheroes accomplishes is seeing how the powers interact with each other. A really fun example is when Thor shoots lightning at Iron Man and it charges his suit up to 400%. Very exciting, very fun. Actually, I just watched a Screencrush video all about this scene where Thor, Iron Man, and Captain America fight in the woods and how important it is to the MCU. It's from Screencrush, and I think the host, Ryan Erie, makes a lot of good points in that, but I kind of disagree with him on the singularity and singular importance of that scene in saving the MCU. I think it's a good scene. I think it's important, but I don't think it's that important as he makes it out to be. Still a good video, worth a watch. I'll link it down in my description. But regardless, showing how these powers interact with each other is really, really fun, and another thing that us nerds have been comparing for a long time. One of my favorite other examples is in Avengers Infinity War, when Star-Lord's gravity mind sucks Iron Man against a wall, which was really fun and satisfying. Yay. Another big thing that having superheroes fight each other does for your story is that it level sets the movie, right? While most of these fights have a winner and a loser, it's usually not a very clear winner. Typically one of the heroes gets the upper hand simply because they're clever or outsmart another character, or quite frankly, the plot demands it. At the end of the day, they're usually pretty evenly matched, and that does a lot for your movie because now both characters are on the same playing field. Both characters are equally challenged by the villain. Both characters are validated, and therefore it makes us, the viewers, want to watch those movies that they came from most recently, and it validates those movies' existences in the first place because, again, all the heroes are on the same playing field, and that's really, really good. This is another thing that Ryan Erie talked about in his Screencrush video. And lastly, by having your characters fight each other, this is a really good way to do foreshadowing for their superpowers. It doesn't feel cheap to us, the audience, if the character pulls out a secret superpower or something in the middle of a battle between heroes, because ultimately we know those heroes aren't going to win or lose. You know, that we know that they have to eventually end fighting each other and fight the big bad villain. But by introducing one of their superpowers early in the fight between superheroes, it then makes sense why that superpower comes up again later against the supervillain. Famous example, Iron Man 2. Rhodey and Iron Man shoot their repulsor blasts at each other, and bing, bang, boom, they use that at the end of the movie to defeat the big bad evil guy. That's great. So, when it comes to the Thunderbolts and the Marvels, you guessed it, the Thunderbolts has lots of battles between the heroes. They have the notable one down in the furnace, and then they also have all the Thunderbolts fight the Sentry. And both of these work really well. The first one does level set the playing field. All the Thunderbolts have basically the same power set. Although, not for nothing, but the three trapped down below in the basement all have vastly different abilities. Yelena is a super spy, John Walker is a super soldier, and Ghost has some utility by being able to phase through things, in and out of things. It's only when they add Bucky and Red Guardian that their power sets start to get a little redundant with adding two new super soldiers on top of John Walker. But that's beside the point. The point is that they fight each other and they all have the same playing field. And then when they fight Sentry, you know, they all lose against Sentry and they show off the fact that Sentry is just so much more powerful than any of them. And it works brilliantly both times, and these fights are really good for the story. However, in the Marvels, we have no such fights like this. Now, an argument could be made for the Marvels that it was hard to write such a fight between superheroes into that movie, but I think that's a pretty big warning flag if the only other movie to do that is Captain America the Winter Soldier, which is an absolute masterpiece. So unless you're sitting on a masterpiece, you probably should include a fight between your superheroes to make the fans happy, to show off their powers, and to do all those good things I just talked about. But they didn't do that. And I get with the current plot of the Marvels, with them switching places whenever they use their powers at the same time, it does cause a little bit of a problem because you couldn't easily fight each other in those sort of circumstances. But I still don't love that excuse because you could have written a different plot, right? Right. Anyway, at the end of the day, the Marvels doesn't feature a superhero on superhero battle, and I think that weakens the movie overall, especially compared to the Thunderbolts, which had 2 of them, which were great. Next, I want to talk about the importance of commentary, or superheroes commenting on other superheroes' backstories or their powers or their costumes or what have you, because it's really funny when they do this. But more than just the humor it provides, it also really humanizes the characters. Because at the end of the day, these are all goofy superheroes in a goofy superhero universe. So calling attention to some of the goofier elements can be a really fun and lighthearted way to cut the tension in a film. And I love it when it happens. Like, some of my favorite scenes are surrounding this very topic. Iron Man calling Captain America a capsicle. The other Peters asking Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker how organic webbing works, or a million other situations. And the Thunderbolts has this, right? They have it in spades. They talk about this all the time. My personal favorite is when they're in the back of the moving van and John Walker is asking about the Captain America cowl. He's like, does this make me look cool? Because I don't know. And he's super insecure about it. It's super funny, and it's something that I've always thought looked kind of goofy on Captain America. I really appreciated that at the end of Avengers 1 and Avengers 2 and Captain America 1 and Captain America 2, he takes off his cowl to finish out the movie. It just makes him look better, in my opinion. And so it's super funny that John Walker has these insecurities. It works so well. But as you might have guessed, the Marvels has nothing like this. Like, they had the perfect opportunity where Carol asks Monica Rambeau how she got her powers, and she says, I walked through a witch's hex. And you should have asked next, well, did anyone else walk through it? Did they get superpowers? But they didn't. Not only did no one else get superpowers, but also they never asked this follow-up question. And I feel like that would have been a really funny moment in the movie is, Monica could have stopped and thought for a second and been like, come to think of it, other people did walk through the hex, but none of them got superpowers. I don't know. That would have been funny. Or another big thing is, like, Miss Marvel was supposedly a huge fangirl of Captain Marvel, like the biggest fangirl, right? Right. But she doesn't ask a single question of Carol Danvers. Like, she doesn't have a single fangirl moment. They absolutely should have included that. Like, it would have been so funny for her to be like, I've got a million questions I've been dying to ask you. How does your star work? How do you breathe in space? How does all this work? That would have been funny, and that would have, again, humanized the characters, made them feel like real people. But they didn't do that, and it hurts the movie. The last thing I want to talk about is the importance of the team struggling to work together, right? Because every other team-up movie has this in their movie. Even Captain America the Winter Soldier, which doesn't have Captain America or Black Widow fighting each other, shows those two characters struggling to trust each other. They eventually build that trust, but it takes time. Or Avengers 2. The team is together, but they struggle to stay together. Like, they have different opinions on how they should handle Ultron, and it causes a big rift in the group. And stuff like that. As you might have guessed, the Marvels does not have struggles with their team coming together or staying together. They say they have struggles. They say we're not a team, but then invariably they act as a team anyways. And it just boggles the mind. Like, Carol Danvers is supposed to be the most powerful MCU character, so, like, the fact that she doesn't just go off on her own to stop Dar-Ven and, like, tell Monica and Kamala, don't use your powers and I'll just stop her, is baffling to me. They kind of have a scene like that, but not really, and it just, it frustrates me. On the other hand, the Thunderbolts has scenes like this in spades. They have so many scenes of the characters bickering and arguing and struggling to stay together as a team. It is hilarious, but it's also very compelling. It's very realistic and true to life. These characters do not get along well together, but somehow they have to figure out a way to get along well together because otherwise they aren't going to survive. And it's great. It's good storytelling. And at the climax of the movie, Yelena famously tells them, "We're all losers and today we lost," and she breaks up the team, which is devastating and causes issues for the team. But then when they all come together, it's very satisfying. Yes, it's like 2 minutes later, but that doesn't negate the importance of that scene, nor the struggles, the very real struggles that the Thunderbolts had coming together as a team. It just works so well. So in the end, the Thunderbolts took full advantage of the fact that it was a team-up movie. It understood the importance of comparing their characters. It understood the importance of having the superheroes fight each other. It understood the importance of the characters making commentary on each other's powers, costumes, and origins. It understood the importance of the team struggling to stay together, to form together. It did this all so well, and as a result, it told compelling character arcs for almost all of its characters. Yes, Ghost didn't get the greatest love, but that's beside the point. The point is that it had good characters. And when I care about their characters, I care about that movie, and I care about the ending of that movie, really. Because at the end of the day, the Marvels had the sadder ending. One of the characters was lost in space. Yes, I know she's probably coming back. It's a comic book movie, but that's beside the point. The point is, I should be sad at that. I should be sad that they just formed this team, but now they lost her. But I don't feel anything because I don't care about those characters. At the end of the Thunderbolts, when they have this big group hug, and it's this very satisfying conclusion to all their characters' arcs, and they realize that they are a team and they can work together, it is so happy. I am cheering, I am jumping for joy when that final moment happens. It just makes me so happy. So I love the Thunderbolts. I really don't like the Marvels. It's not a movie I hate, but it's just bland and boring and doesn't take advantage of the fact that it was a team-up movie, and that's why the Thunderbolts succeeded where the Marvels failed.